Flabbergasted, Melbourne doctor with coronavirus symptoms continued seeing patients. Victorian Health Minister says doctor likely caught COVID-19 while in US but had seen 70 patients since returning.
Here's a summary of the article.
Victorian health authorities are trying to contact about 70 patients of a Melbourne doctor who was diagnosed with coronavirus a week after returning from the US. The doctor is the state's 11th case of the novel coronavirus, and the state health minister, Jenny Mikakos, said he attended work and treated patients after he was symptomatic. "I have to say I am flabbergasted that a doctor that has flu-like symptoms has presented to work," Mikakos said. Patients have been contacted by text message, phone or email, and 2 patients the doctor treated in a Malvern nursing home have been isolated. "Our advice to the community is that if you have returned from overseas and are experiencing cold or flu-like symptoms, then please stay home, do not go to work. You should self-isolate until such time as you are able to be presenting to a doctor, getting medical advice about whether you potentially have COVID-19, Mikakos said. "I understand our medical and healthcare workers are dedicated to the work they do. It is incredibly important work and they are absolutely committed to their patients, and I understand, particularly at this time of, I guess, an international health emergency, that all healthcare workers would be wanting to assist their patients. But it is irresponsible for people to be going to work if they are unwell, and that is not just healthcare workers, it is everybody in the community who needs to take this very seriously." She said the doctor's symptoms were mild, as 80% of coronavirus cases had been globally, but that his decision to continue to treat patients was something for the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency to pursue. Victoria's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Brett Sutton, urged people to get tested immediately if they suspected they had coronavirus rather than going to work with cold-like symptoms.
This post received a score of 9,695, with an upvote ratio of 93%. Here are the top comments in response to this article.
As was said in another thread, this is an extremely unfair spin to put on the doctor. They cause anything from a slight itch to sneezing, coughing blood, swelling, pains, and debilitating migraines. Many of those could cross symptoms with all sorts of nasty illnesses. That said, if I start getting unusual symptoms or it continues an uncommonly long time, I'd get tested. However, by then I'm probably well past being contagious.
Greater than sneezing, coughing blood, that would be tip number 1. That's not normal under any circumstances.
Depending on the air and your allergies, your sinuses can dry out and cause bloody mucus. Especially when you get up in the morning. It's not really that unusual.
Yep, I get minor bleeds occasionally, especially if the air is dry. If it's much below 40% relative humidity for a while, the inside of my nose and sinuses just dries up and eventually starts bleeding. Coughing up actual blood, as opposed to just a bit of slightly bloody mucus that happened to drip down into your throat while you were sleeping or something, would be a more serious sign, though.
Not ours like something from a horror movie, just nasty phlegmy stuff.
I am an Australian GP. The Australian government makes rules of who we should, and shouldn't test for coronavirus. It's not feasible to test everyone at this stage. Victorian GP follows the government's rules and doesn't test himself after getting back from USA with mild cold. Then unexpectedly found to be infected with coronavirus and gets threatened with deregistration by the state government and is named and shamed in media. Source: Australian Government Guideline for Who Should Be Tested, refer to page 5.
That pisses me off no end. If he'd called the hotline and said I have these symptoms and just got back from the US, we all know full well the Vic government wouldn't have tested him. All it does is highlight the mildness of the virus in healthy adults and why we should be aware of who we are in contact with. But until they're testing us all regularly, they absolutely should not be scapegoating poor fuckers like this GP who didn't actually do anything wrong.
Yes. Come next week, I intend to keep testing my patients as required appropriately by the situation, but I am aware of a risk that I could be scapegoated for whatever reason. This reaction from the government doesn't fill me with confidence as a front-line worker.
The country he transited from is not on Australia's high or even moderate risk countries. By the current Australian recommendations, he didn't even meet the criteria for testing. Bottom line, aside from hysteria, there was no reason to suspect this doctor had SARS-CoV-2, and if the Victorian health minister wants healthcare professionals to call in sick at the slightest sign of a sniffle, she's going to really fucking struggle to keep her health system running through this pandemic.
This video was automatically created by Reddit to speech. The article and comments in this video were selected from Reddit according to their upvotes, and any paraphrasing was performed by smmry.com, without any human intervention.